I know as a writer, one of the things I get possibly a little too caught up with is trying to visualize a place if I'm writing something. And if it's a place I don't know, I'll either want to go there or find as many images as possible of it for a sense of location. And then you read Shakespeare and you realize that for him, it's sort of just setting, and you can actually transplant most of his plays.
Sometimes he just forgot about real places, and I was thinking about Belmont, in The Merchant of Venice, and how it works as an unreal setting for what he wants to do, which is to have people interacting in a way that wouldn't be the usual way in real life. And this castle might work a bit like that as well.
It is nice though when you go to a place and yourself can imagine that the characters in the play could have happened there. So to be walking in here and imagining that this is where the king and his consorts all said, no women can come in here.
And in that way, it really works well, because it does have that feeling of isolation and kind of walled up situation into which women come and disrupt everything. So I kind of like that as well in the play.
I think the interesting question is whether it's possible to write, certainly in English, and not be influenced by Shakespeare, even if you've never read him. Because, for one, just the language we use, there's so many of his words and expressions that are in everyday conversation. But I wonder whether our sense of human psychology would have been very different if we didn't have something like Hamlet. So, there's that back story that I think Shakespeare has on all of us, and it's interesting to me if it's very different if you're a Spanish language writer.
Now, I remember we were in Segovia yesterday, as you know, and Marcos Giral, the writer, said something that's very interesting, is how the Anglo-Saxon way of narrating and of telling stories has permeated every other culture. No? And the funny thing is that when I first read Shakespeare at length and seriously, so to speak, I kept thinking of Hollywood. No? I kept thinking of John Ford, of John Huston, of big classical Hollywood movies from the 40s and 50s and 60s, as if Shakespeare had been influenced by Hollywood. And then all of a sudden I realized, no, it's the other way around. Everything we are told, every story we make can be traced back to Shakespeare and the way he told things, the way the plot develops, the way the characters are introduced with just a slight touch here and there. And so he's so present. I mean, you don't need to be an English language reader or speaker to be almost formed by the Shakespearean way of seeing things and of telling tales. No?
There's a moment in Othello where Iago's wife Emilia sort of reveals how Iago has basically tricked everyone, and he kills her, and she says, "So speaking the truth, I die." And I think that one of those great moments that the power that women have is in speech in Shakespeare. In the histories or the tragedies, they can physically be killed to silence them, and the comedies will always take it another route.
It happens in this particular one, and I was thinking, we were talking about Portia before. I do love Portia a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the strongest female characters in all of Shakespeare and in all of the history of theatre in a way. No?
Yeah.
And I love the way she kind of disrupts and messes up with men by taking them into her dominion and language becoming her way of getting what she wants. No?
Yeah. The other thing I really like in there is that she has a female friend, Nerissa. And again, I think he can be very good on women's friendships. Winter's Tale is, of course, one of the best examples of that. But it's this idea of, I think he was interested in women's interior life and women together and the way, because I think power is one of his great subjects, and he's very aware of it in gender terms.
So, what do you mean, that they exert their own power between themselves as well, or?
Well, I think he's aware sometimes that, as in The Winter's Tale, that sometimes they have to band together against a stronger power. But he's also aware that they are living in worlds where men have most of the power of a certain sort. And so he continually gives women the language power, which of course in the play is going to be one of the most profound kinds of power you have.
Well, in a theatrical play, of course. No? See, and the way it is playful all the time, no? The way it's a soft power, no? Against, violence exerted by men is often deactivated by this kind of soft power exerted by women. I kind of like that.
When I was reading Julius Caesar, and this wasn't the first time I'd read it, I was studying it, and I must have been about 14 or 15. And I'd read it several times. I don't know why this particular time was different, but I was reading that moment when Mark Antony, Julius Caesar's been killed. Antony has shaken the hands of his murderers who are dripping with blood. And then they leave, and he looks at the body of Caesar and says, "Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers." And I remember this one time I read it and I just got shivers running up and down my spine. And there's a thing Nabokov talks about, which is the spine test of literature.
Such a good test.
Yeah, and that spine test, I remember that happening, this electric moment with Julius Caesar, and just sort of being knocked over by it. So that line has a very personal place for me in something just opened up for me in understanding Shakespeare and language.